Hey guys, how you going? I got this a while ago, and I've sat on it for quite a while, but I think it's time to read this. This is what the Freemasons had in store for us, and it's been translated from French to English by an Anon. Prepare for change. And anyone who knows what an Anon is, if you're a patriot, you're an Anon. If you're fighting for your country, you're an Anon, or you're a patriot. If you're bringing things forward and researching, you're an Anon and a patriot. Okay, an untranslated leaked secret cabal doc titled Memoirs de Rem. I hope I said that right. It's by Inevitable E.T. After I post this, I might just sit back and read it all day long. This is so epic. So epic. Anon. Translated leaked cabal doc from 1985 from French to English, an old French periodical called, and then it doesn't tell you what it's called. Okay, this was on the Q research boards. I found something that might be related to the infamous Keystone, but that is extremely interesting in its own right. It is something that I've seen in partial from before, but in fact lacking the part with the Keystone. It is a text written by a French Canadian in 1995 called Serge Monsat. It is supposed to be leaked plans the cabal put together on two separate occasions in 1967 and in 1985. There are some details in it that sound too good to be true, such as the name of the group, but symbolism will be their downfall and all that. However, this text describes what we have been throughout the past decades so well that it's scary. It is even more scary once you read what is supposed to be their ultimate goal. Keystones are mentioned twice, but it is the second instance that seems relevant. In summary, this text says that the keystone for the cabal is the establishment of the worldwide interconnected network of computers. To them, this is a vast surveillance network that always do as told, that has no political opinion, no religion, no race. To them, it replaces parts of their vast networks of humans and allow them for a level of surveillance they could not have dreamed of before. To them, their plan could not be accomplished without it. To quote them, they are the keystone of their new world order. That seems rather congruent with some of the Q posts related to that topic were saying. What holds everything together? The Keystone software implant, the surveillance network of intelligence agencies, POTUS having opened the door of all doors, i.e., maybe the doors to the massive surveillance machine put in place by the cabal that he can now use to take it down. As I say, this could all be the Keystone or it could not be. However, it is really interesting in its own right as it resonates so much with the reality of what has happened. And if it is true, that's not a 40,000 foot view, that is a 4 million foot view. Serge Monsat died of a sudden heart attack shortly after publishing this. Heart attacks can be deadly. As I said, I have seen this partially translated before elsewhere, but I gathered my courage and translated the whole document from French. The strange capitalization comes from the original text. I tried to respect it. Apologies if there are spelling, grammar mistakes. It is very long and I do not have time to proofread it at the moment. Actual text in subsequent posts. Okay. So this is the beginning of the translation. Late June 1967 in Montreal, there's the 67 Expo in Ottawa. The last preparations for the 100th anniversary of the Confederation are taking place in the US. We see the contestation movements against the Vietnam War and throughout the country the flower power. We are close to the May 68 events in France, to the nationalism explosion in Quebec, to the Woodstock Festival in the US. But at the same time, this end of June 1967 is marked with the last preparations toward the development of the plan for the fall of nations, carried out by the high instances of the Anglo-Saxon Freemasonry in Toronto, Canada. This secret meeting, highly confidential, is organised by the 6.6.6 point. That is the term they use for themselves. That is, those that directed the 6 largest banks of the world, the 6 largest energetic consortiums to which petroleum belongs, and the 5 largest food industry consortiums to which the control of the main food roadways of the world belongs. These 6.6.6, being the highest heads of international finance, will define with their meeting a common strategy with a view to the absolute control on world commerce, on the possession of the energetic weapon, gateway to the 21st century, and on the international control of the food industry, which encompasses as well for them the pharmaceutical consortiums, encompassing themselves as the worldwide markets of vitamins and vaccines. Their plan consists in 3 major directions: the economical, the political, and the social. For the 70s and the 80s, if they succeed, it must irremediably end up with the seizure of the world power through the establishment of the New World Order, the very same the American President George Bush will so promote at the beginning of the 1990s. Beginning of the 6.6.6 point document, date late June 1967. Title: Of Bread and Circus Games. And I cannot say that, I'm sorry. Goal of the project: the genocide of what is vital to the benefit and the profitable for the occult. Funding means, among others, use humanitarian aid and international food aid to finance the 6.6.6 point multinationals. All the historical periods having led to the decadence of civilizations were marked without exception by the spirit of wandering of men. Today we must make it so that this spirit translates into worldwide leisure society in all its forms. This leisure must comprise sex, drugs, sport, travel, exoticism, and leisures in general, but accessible to all the layers of society. Man must reach the belief that he is modern, and that his modernity comprises his ability and his opportunity to enjoy widely and now everything that surrounds him. To reach this goal, it is imperative to be able to infiltrate the media, radio, television, newspapers, the worlds of fashion and culture, the world of new music, through which we influence, certainly all the layers of Western societies. This way, by keeping to our will the senses of the youth, the adults of tomorrow, we will have free rein to infiltrate and transform in depth, with interference, the political, the judiciary system and education, which will allow to modify in depth the course, the future orientation of the societies targeted by our plan. Populations, as we know it, have no historical memory. They tirelessly repeat the mistakes of the past without realizing that these same mistakes had leads their fathers before them to the same forfeitures they will live through in a worse way before the end of this century. See, for instance, what their grandfathers lived through at the beginning of this century through the hard work of our predecessors. And I believe the only reason it didn't happen at the end of the century was because there were people trying to stop it. After having gone through without limits the liberation of their ways of life, the abolition of morals, in other words, the wandering of the spirit, they experienced the economical crisis and then the war. Today their grandchildren and their children are heading straight towards a similar outcome. Worse even, as this time it will allow us to finally establish our new world order without having any of them being able to realize it. Too preoccupied they will be by the exaggerated satisfaction of the needs of their most primary senses. A general norm of the utmost importance, and that has already proved itself at the beginning of the current century in the building and in the establishment of the communist system by the late high officers of our lodges is the profitability of the exception. In principle, we know it, the exception proves the general rule that is its opposite. But in our vocabulary, the exception is what must be imposed on everyone. We must ensure to have exceptions in different spheres of society, as needing to be new general rules applicable to all, to be a primary objective of all the future social disputes led by the youth of nations. In this way, the exception will become the detonator through which the historical society will collapse on itself in unprecedented shortness of breath and confusion. The foundation of the Western society in its essence come directly from the Judeo-Christian legacy. This is precisely this legacy that made of family the core and the keystone of the current social fabric. Our predecessors that had financed the revolutionary writers of the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century had understood the importance of splitting this vital core, if they wanted, in Russia, achieved to establish the new communist system of that time. And this is precisely what they did by meticulously having the philosophers and nonconformist writers of that time produce a manifest to the glory of the God state, which had absolute primacy on the individual, on the family. To succeed with certainty at constructing a world government, a new global community order, where all the individuals without exception will be submitted to the world state of the new order, we must firstly make disappear the family, which will lead by the same token to the disappearance of the ancestral religious teaching, and secondly level all the individuals by making disappear the social classes, in particular the middle class. But we must proceed in such a way that all these changes appear as emanating from the people's will, that they create the appearance of democracy. Using isolated cases but amplifying them to the extreme with the help of student protests infiltrated by us, of journalists favourable to our cause, and of bought politicians, we will achieve to establish new organisations having every appearance of modernity, such as child protection services protected by a Bill of Rights and Freedoms. For the success of our world plan, the Red Plan, we must establish in all the Western societies of the 70s child protection services, the public servants of which, young intellectuals without experience, fresh out of universities, where are highlighted our globalist principles, will enforce to the letter, without distinction, the Children's Bill of Rights. Who will dare oppose this without, at the same time, being identified to barbarity of the Middle Ages? This bill, laboriously elaborated in our lodges, will finally allow us to bring to naught all parental authority by breaking up the family and individuals, fiercely opposed to each other, to defend their personal interests. It will encourage the children to report parents that are too authoritarian, because too traditional, too religious. It will thus contribute to the submission of the parents to a collective psychosis of fear, which will inevitably provoke, in a general manner throughout society, a relaxation of parental authority. In this way we will have succeeded, in a first time, to produce a society similar to that of the Russia of the 50s, where children were reporting to the state their parents without anybody noticing. By thusly transferring to the state of the parental role, it will be easier for us thereafter to take over, one by one, all the responsibilities that had, to date, been the exclusive preserve of the parents. It is in this way that we will be able to make everyone consider as an abuse against children the traditional religious teachings of Judeo-Christian origins. At the same time, but at another level, we will have inscribed in the highest laws of the nations that all the religions, the cults, and religious practices of all sorts, including witchcraft and magic, don't know why I couldn't say that, must all be respected in the same ways as each other. It will be, after that, with disconcerting ease, to transfer this state's role towards children to the highest international institutions, such as the United Nations. Understand this. Our goal is not to protect children or anything else, but to cause the burst and then the collapse of the nations that have been a major obstacle to the establishment of our New World Order. This is the reason why the child protection services must be provided an absolute legal authority. They must be able, as they see fit, but always under the pretense of child protection, to subtract them to their original family environment, and place them in a foreign family environment or in governmental centres already committed to our globalist and non-religious principles. Consequently, the final breakup of the Western family unit, because without the protection and the surveillance of their original parents, it will be possible to definitively handicap these children in their psychological and moral development and constitute, as a natural consequence, preys easily mouldable to our globalist aims. To ensure the success of such an undertaking, it is essential that the public servants working in these state services be young, without prior experience, imbued with theories we know to be empty and without efficacy, and above all be obsessed by the missionary spirit of the great protectors of children under threat. Because for them, all the parents must be viewed as potential criminals, as potential dangers to the well-being of the child, heretofore considered as being a god. Child protection services and a Bill of Children's Rights have no reason to exist without children under threat. Moreover, the exceptions and the historical examples used for their establishment would sooner or later disappear if they were not constantly provided with new cases occurring on a continual basis. In that sense, we must infiltrate the education system of the nations to make disappear, under the pretense of modernity and of the evolution, teachings of religion, history, propriety, at the same time diluting with an avalanche of new experimentation in education that of language and mathematics. In this manner, by subtracting to the young generations any basis and any moral thresholds, any knowledge of the past, thus any national pride, hence any respect for others, any power provided by the knowledge of language and sciences, thus on reality, we will contribute to produce a youth widely predisposed to all forms of delinquency. In this new universe, fragmented by the fear of the parents and their abandonment of responsibilities towards their children, we will not be incumbent to form, in our way and according to our primary objectives, a youth where arrogance, contempt, and humiliation of others will be considered as the new basis of self-affirmation and of liberty. But we know from the experience of the past that such a youth is already condemned to its self-destruction, as it is fundamentally individualist, hence anarchist by definition. In that sense, it cannot constitute a solid basis for the continuity of any society, and even less a safe bet for taking care of its elders. In the same vein, it is also imperative to have created a Bill of Individual Rights and Liberties and Citizens Protection Services, touting to the masses that these innovations are an integral part of the modernity of the new societies of the 20th century. In the same manner, and at the same time, but at another level, obtain the vote of new laws for the enforcement of individual liberties, as in the case of the family, but at the level of society. These laws will conflict with the rights of collectivity, leading this way the targeted societies straight to their self-destruction, because here the inversion is total. It It is not the society, the right of the individual majority that must be protected against individual that could threaten it, but rather the right of the individual that must be protected against the possible threats coming from the majority. Such is the objective we're aiming for. There you go, that says a lot about the minorities at the moment. To complete the breaking up of the family, of the education system, and thus of society in general, it is essential to promote sexual freedom at all the levels of Western society. The individual, hence the masses, must be reduced to the obsession of satisfying his basic instincts by any possible mean. We know that this step will constitute the high point through which any society will end up collapsing on itself. Is it not what happened to the Roman Empire when it reached its peak, and to all the similar civilizations throughout history? I've heard that before. Using scientists and laboratories funded by our lodges, we have succeeded in developing a chemical process that will revolutionize all the Western societies and will cast to oblivion for eternity the moral and religious Judeo-Christian principles. This process, in the form of a pill, will pave widely the way to sexual freedom without consequences, and will encourage women of the nations to want to break with what will then be perceived as the yoke of the past, the enslavement of women, submitted to men, and the traditional Judeo-Christian family. Once centre and pivot of the family cell, the modern woman, now as an independent individual, will want to break her traditional role, to detach herself from her family, and to lead her life according to her own aspirations. Nothing more natural, we know it, but where we will strongly intervene will be the infiltration of all the new feminist protest movements by pushing their logic to the extreme limits of deduction. And those limits are already inscribed in the breakup of the traditional family and of the Judeo-Christian society. This sexual liberation will be the ultimate mean through which it will be possible for us to make disappear from the popular conscience any reference to good and evil. The collapse of this religious and moral barrier will allow us to achieve the process of false liberation of man from his past, that in reality will instead be a form of enslavement that will be beneficial to our globalist plans. This open door to incentivizing sexual freedom, divorce, abortion on demand, the legal recognition of the various forms of homosexuality will help us modify in depth the historical basis of the legal right of societies. It will be a major asset to push the ensemble of individuals toward a generalized relaxation of their ways of life, to divide the individuals against each other, to destruct the future of youths by pushing them to the detrimental experiences of early sexuality and abortion, and to shatter the moral of future generations by pushing them towards alcoholism, towards the various drugs, the worldwide control of which will be looked after by our high officers of our international lodges, and towards suicide, being thought about by a disillusioned and left to fend for itself youth as being a noble end. Let us deceive the youth of the nations by showing it its parents as irresponsible, irreligious, immoral, only seeking ultimately pleasure, escape, and frenzied satisfaction of their instincts at the cost of lies, hypocrisy, and betrayal. Let us make divorce and abortion a new social custom accepted by all. Let us thusly promote to it criminality in all its forms, and the sheltering into distinct groups, out of the reach of the familial environment that it will perceive, inevitably, as a threat to its own survival. The social fabric being in this way forever changed, it will henceforth be possible to us to act on the political and the economical of the nations in order to submit them to our mercy, to be led to accept by force our plans for a new world order, because we have to admit the nations so deprived of being able to count on a strong youth, on a society where the individuals gathered around a common ideal, reinforced by unwavering moral barriers, could have provided it its historical support, will have no choice but to yield to our globalist will. In this way, we will be able to usher what was much heralded by our previous creations, the communist system that prophesied a worldwide revolution initiated by all of those cast aside on the earth, and the Nazism through which we had declared a new world order for 1,000 years. So is our ultimate goal. The rewards for the work of the brave who died accomplishing the work towards its achievement for centuries. Let us say with conviction, all the brothers of the past lodges who died in the anonymity for the accomplishment of this ideal that is now at the tip of our fingers. Everybody well agrees that man, after having secured his primary needs, food, clothing, and a home, is more inclined to be less vigilant. Let us allow him to make his conscience sleep, while guiding as please us his mind by creating fictitiously favourable economic conditions. Therefore, during the period of the 70s, during which our agents will infiltrate everywhere, the different spheres of society, to induce the acceptance of our new norms in education, the legal rights, the social and the political, we will ensure to permeate around him a trustworthy economic climate. Work for everyone, credit for everyone, leisure for everyone will be our vehicle for the illusionary creation of a new social class, the middle class. Because once our objectives are attained, this middle class, between the poor, secular, and us, the rich, we will make it disappear by definitively removing all means of survival. In that sense, we will make of the nation-states the new parents of the individuals. Through this climate of trust, where our international agents will have what is necessary to remove the spectre of world war, we will overly promote centralisation for the state. In this manner, the individuals will be able to acquire the sense of having total freedom to explore, while the legendary burden of personal responsibilities will be transferred to the state. It is in this way that it will be possible for us to increase in a staggering fashion the burden of the state by multiplying without any limit the mass of public servant intellectuals. Confident in having material security for years in advance, these will be in consequence perfect executors of the governmental power, in other words, of our power. Creating in this way an impressive mass of public servants that, alone, will constitute a government within the government, irrespective of the political party in power. This anonymous machine will be able to be used by us one day as a lever, when the time has come, to accelerate the economical collapse of the nation-states, for they will not be able to indefinitely support payroll expenditures without having to indebt themselves beyond their means. On the other hand, this same machine that will provide a cold and insensitive image for the government apparatus, this complex and oh so useless machine, in many of its functions will provide us a smokescreen and protection against the populations, because who will dare venture through the mazes of such labyrinth in order to exert their personal grievances? Still, during this period of generalized dizziness, we will take this opportunity to buy or eliminate, according to the needs of the moment, all the company directors, the heads of large organizations of the states, the scientific research centers, the action and the efficacy of which could risk providing too much power to the nation-states. It is imperative that the state does not become an independent force in itself that would risk escaping us and endanger our ancestral plans. We will see as well to have an absolute stranglehold on all the supranational structures of the nations. These international organizations must be positioned under our absolute jurisdiction. In the same way, and to guarantee the profitability of our influence with the populations, we will need to control all the information media. Our banks will thus see to only provide funding to those that are favourable to us, while they will supervise the closure of most recalcitrant This should, in principle, go unnoticed by the populations. Absorbed they will be by making more money and divert themselves. We must take care of finalising, as of now, the deregionalisation phase initiated at the beginning of the 1929 economic crisis. Overpopulate the cities was our vehicle for the Industrial Revolution. The rural landowners, by their economic independence, by their ability to produce the basis for the food of the states, is a threat to us and to our future plans. Crammed into the cities, they will be more dependent of our industries to survive. We cannot allow for the existence of groups independent from our power. Therefore, let us eliminate landowners by making them obedient slaves to the industries under our control. Regarding the others, let us allow them to organise themselves into agricultural cooperatives that our agents will infiltrate to better orient them towards our future priorities. Through the state, let us aim to highlight the mandatory respect of diversity of cultures, people, religions, ethnicities, which will all be ways for us to make individual liberty come before the notion of national unity, which will allow us to better divide the populations of the nation states and thus weaken them in their authority and in their ability to manoeuvre, push to its extreme limits. But at the international level, this concept in the future will lead the ethnicities of the various nations to band together in order to each claim individually their part of the power, which will complete the ruin of the nations and will break them apart in endless wars. When the nation states will be thusly weakened by so many internal wars, all founded on the recognition of the rights of the minorities to their independence, when the nationalists divide in different culture and religious factions will oppose each other blindly in hopeless struggles, when the youth will have completely lost contact with its roots, then we will be able to use the United Nations to begin the imposition of our new world order. Moreover, at this stage, the humanitarian, social and historical ideals of the nation states will have long burst from the pressure of the internal divisions. And that was the end of the late June 1967 document. 18 years later, i.e. a 6.6.6 point time interval later, i.e. a 6.6.6 point time interval later, was held another meeting of importance in Canada. The 6.6.6 point group met again in Toronto in late June 1985. But this time the matter at hand was the finalisation of the last steps meant to end up on the fall of the nation states and on the power takeover through the United Nations. Now here's the beginning of the 6.6.6 point document dated late June 1985. Title: Red Dawn. Goal of the project: establishment of the occult worldwide. Funding means: control of the IMF, of the GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, of the Brussels Commission, of NATO, of the UN, and of other international organisms. The last 18 years have been very profitable in the advancement of our worldwide projects. I can tell you, brothers, that we are now almost touching our goal. The fall of the United Nations is now a matter of time. Rather short, I must admit with full confidence. Thanks to our infiltration agents and to our colossal financial means, progress without precedent have been made in all the scientific and technological fields for which we control financially the largest corporations. Since our secret meetings with M. D. Rothschild around the year 1956 that had foretold full goal, the development and the worldwide implantation of the computers, it's now possible for us to foresee the installation of a sort of international roadway where all these machines would be linked together. Because, as you already know, the direct and individualized control of the populations of the planet would actually be impossible without the usage of the computers and their electronic linking to each other in a vast worldwide network. These machines also have for themselves the ability to replace millions of individuals. Furthermore, they have no conscience or morals whatsoever, which is indispensable for the accomplishment of a project like ours. But above all, these machines accomplish without discussion everything that is ordered from them. They are the perfect slaves our predecessors dreamt so much about, without ever thinking that someday it would be possible for us to accomplish such a marvel. These machines, without country, without colour, without religion, without political affiliation, are the ultimate accomplishment and tool of our New World Order. They are its keystone. There's the keystone. The arrangements of these machines in a vast worldwide network of which we will control the higher levers will allow us to immobilise the populations. How? As you know, the basic structure of our New World Order is composed in its essence of a multitude of varied networks covering all the spheres of human activity on the full extent of the planet. Up to this day, all these networks were linked together by a common ideological basis, that of man being the centre and ultimate accomplishment of the universe. This way, thanks to all these networks united together by the link of the new religion of man for man, we have easily been able to infiltrate all the human sectors in all the Western countries, to modify its Judeo-Christian basis. The result today is that this man, whether he belongs to the political, the economy, the social, the education, the sciences, or the religions, has already, since our last meeting at the end of June 67, surrendered his heritage from the past to replace it by our ideal of a worldwide religion solely based on the man. Cut in this way as he now is from his historical roots, this man now only waits, in the end, that can be offered to him a new ideology. This one, of course, being ours, the ideology of the global community village, of which he will be the centre. And this is precisely what we will bring him by encouraging him to partake body and soul in this worldwide electronic network, where the borders between nations will have been forever abolished, annihilated up to their deepest roots. While this stray man will be consumed by his blind enthusiasm in belonging to his new worldwide community, by joining this computer network, for our benefit we will, using the higher levels that will be hidden from him, make a file on him, identify him, measure him, and make him profitable with respect to our own objectives. Because inside this new global society, no individual presenting as potential for profitability to us will be able to escape us. The constant input from the electronic technology should provide us with all the means necessary to make a file on, identify and control all the individuals in the Western populations. Regarding all those that will not present any exploitable profitability to us, we will make so that they will eliminate themselves through local internal wars that we will have taken care to foment here and there by using the economic fall of the nation states and the oppositions and demands of the various groups that compose these same states. Here is the detailed plan through which we will proceed until 1998 to pave the road to the birth of our worldwide government. 1. Multiply many times over the leisure society that has been so profitable to us this day. By using the video invention that we financed and the games that are attached to it, let us end corrupting the morals of the youth. Let us offer him the possibility of satisfying here and now all his instincts. A being dispossessed of his senses and a slave to them, we know it, has neither an ideal nor an internal force to defend anything. He is an individualist by nature and represents a perfect candidate that we can model easily according to our desires and priorities. By the way, remember how easy our predecessors have been able to direct the whole German youth at the beginning of the century by using its disillusionment. 2. Encourage the student protests for all the causes related to ecology, the mandatory protection of which will be a major asset the day we have pushed the nation states to exchange their interior debt against the loss of 33% of the territories that remained in a wild state. Number 3, let us fill the interior emptiness of that youth by initiating it, since its youngest age, to the universe of computers. To this effect, let us use its educational system, a slave at the service of another slave that we will control. 4. At another level, let us establish worldwide free trade as being an absolute priority for the economic survival of the nation states. This new economic concept will help us hasten the decline of the nationalists of all nations by isolating them in various factions, and at the desired moment by opposing them vigorously to the others through internal wars that will finalise the ruin of these nations. 5. To ensure at all costs the success of such an undertaking, let us make sure our agents that have already infiltrated the cabinets of intergovernmental affairs and migrations of the nation states modify in depth the laws related to those cabinets. These modifications will essentially seek to open the doors of the Western countries to an increasingly more massive migration inside their borders, migration that we will have besides provoked by taking care of fomenting, here and there, new local conflicts. Tough press campaigns, well orchestrated for the public opinion, or trowel press campaigns, well orchestrated for the public opinion of the targeted nation states, will provoke among them an important influx of refugees that will result in the destabilisation of their interior economy and in the increase of the racial tension in their territories. We will see that foreign extremist groups will be part of these migrant influxes, which will facilitate the political, economical, and social destabilisation of the targeted nations. Number 6, this free trade, which in reality is not free as it is already controlled by us at the top of the economical hierarchy, let us separate it into 3 lateral commissions, that of Asia, that of America, and that of Europe. This will provide us dissension inside the nation states through the rise of unemployment connected to the reconstructions of our transnational companies. 7. Let us slowly but surely transfer our transnational companies to new countries committed to the market economy idea, such as the Eastern European countries, Russia and China, for instance. We do not care at the moment if their population presents or not a vast pool of new consumers. That which interests us is having access, in the first place, to the slave labour at a good price and not unionised, offered by these countries and that of the Third World. Moreover, aren't there governments put in place by us? Do they not appeal to foreign aid and loans of our International Monetary Fund and of our World Bank? These transfers provide us several advantages. They contribute to foster in these new populations the illusion of an economic liberation, of political freedom, while in reality we will dominate them through their appetite for gain and a level of indebtedness that they will never be able to repay. Regarding the Western populations, they will be maintained in their dream of economic well-being, as the products imported from these countries will see no increase in price. However, without them realising it at the beginning, more and more industries will be forced to close because of these transfers we will have carried out outside of the Western countries. These closures will increase unemployment and bring about important revenue losses for the nation states. 8. In this way, we will start a global economy at a worldwide scale that will totally escape the control of the nation states. This new economy will be above everything. No pressure from the political or from unions will have any power over it. It will dictate its own world policies. It will force a political reorganisation, but one according to our priorities at the worldwide scale. 9. By this independent economy, having for all law our laws, we will establish a worldwide mass culture. Through the international control of television of the media, we will institute a new culture, but levelled, uniform for everyone, without any future, creation escaping us. The future artists will reflect our image or will not be able to survive. Or will not be able to survive. Over will be the time where independent cultural creations were putting at any moment at risk our globalist projects, as was the case so many times in the past. 10. Through this very economy, it will then be possible for us to use the military forces of these nation-states, such as those of the United States, towards humanitarian goals. In reality, these forces will allow us to submit the countries recalcitrant to our will. This way, the third world countries and those similar to them will not be able to escape our will to use their population as slave labour. 11. To control the worldwide market, we will have to divert productivity from its primary purpose, free man from the hardship of work conditions. We will guide it to turn against man by subjugating him to our economic system, where he will have no choice but become our slave, and even more, a future criminal. 12. All these transfers to foreign countries by our multinationals and the worldwide restructuration of the economy will have as goal, among others, to increase the unemployment in the Western countries. This situation will be all the more achievable since, at the beginning, we will have promoted mass importation of basic products into the nation-states, and by the same token, we will have overloaded the employment of their populations with the production of services that they will not be able to pay for anymore. These extreme conditions will multiply by millions the masses of social welfare recipients of all kinds, of the illiterate, of the homeless. 13. Through the loss of millions of jobs in the primary sector, thanks to the disguised capital flight outside the nation-states, it will thus be possible for us to put in mortal danger the social harmony through the prospect of civil war. 14. These international manipulations of the governments and the populations of the nation-states will provide us the pretext to use our IMF to push the Western governments to adopt austerity budgets under guise of the illusory reduction of their national debt, of the hypothetical conservation of their international credit rating, and of the impossible preservation of the social peace. 15. Through these emergency budgetary measures, we will thus shatter the funding ability of these nation-states towards their mega projects, which constitute a direct menace to our worldwide control of the economy. 16. By the way, all these austerity measures will enable us to break the national wills for modern structures in the fields of energy, agriculture, transportation, and new technologies. 17. The same measures will provide us the perfect opportunity to implement our economic competition ideology. It will translate into, inside the nation-states, the voluntary reduction of earnings and voluntary retirements with medals awarded for services rendered, which will open us the doors to establishing everywhere our control technology. In this perspective, all these requirements will have been replaced by computers at our disposal. Okay, what happened there? 17. And then it's gone back to 13. 18, here we go. These social transformations will help us change in depth the working force of the police and military of the nation-states under the pretense of the needs of the time, and without raising any suspicions, we will rid ourselves once and for all of the individuals having a Judeo-Christian conscience. This restructuration of the police and military corps will enable us to fire without protest the elderly worker, as well as all the elements that do not convey our globalist principles. These will be replaced by young recruits lacking conscience and morals and being already trained to it, favourable towards the reckless use of our electronic network technology. 19. In the same time, and still under the pretense of budgetary cuts, we will see to the transfer of military bases of the nation-states to the United Nations. 20. In this perspective, we will work toward the reorganisation of the international mandate of the United Nations. From peace force without power of decision, we will bring it to become an intervention force, where we'll be melted together into a homogeneous whole, the military forces of the nation-states. This will allow us to carry out, without combat, the demilitarisation of all these states so that none of them in the future will be able to be sufficiently powerful, independent, to question our worldwide power. Hang on. Okay, it's gone to 20 again. 21. To accelerate this transfer process, we will involve the current forces of the United Nations in conflicts impossible to resolve. In this manner, and within the help of the media that we control, we will show the populations the helplessness and the worthlessness of this force in its current form. The resulting frustration, which will be pushed to its breaking point at the desired moment, will help push the populations of the nation-states to beg the international institutions to institute such a multinational force at the earliest in order to protect all costs the peace. 22. The coming appearance of this worldwide will for a multinational military force will go together with the institution inside of the nation-states of a multi-jurisdictional intervention force. This combining of the police and military personnel, created under the pretense of increasing political and social instability inside these states, crushed by the economic burdens, will enable us to better control the Western populations. For this, the overuse of the identification and of electronic files of the individuals will provide us with complete surveillance of all the targeted populations. 23. This restructuration of the police and the military inside and outside of the nation-states will allow to make all this converge towards the necessity of establishing a world judiciary centre. This centre will allow the various police corps of the nation-states to have a rapid access to the data banks on all the individuals that present a possibility of danger for us on the planet. The appearance of a better judicial efficacy and the increasingly tighter links created and maintained with the military will help us to showcase the need for an international tribunal accompanied by a world judiciary system, the former for individual civil and criminal cases and the latter for the nations. 24. During the increasing acceptance by all of these new necessities, it will be of the utmost importance for us to complete at the soonest the worldwide control of firearms inside the borders of the nation-states. To this end, we will accelerate the Alpha Plan, put in motion during the 60s by some of our predecessors. This plan was originally targeting two objectives which remain the same today. By the use of crazy shooters, create an insecurity climate inside the populations to bring about a tighter control of firearms, orienting the acts of violence in a way as to make bear the responsibility to religious extremists or to individuals affiliated to religious allegiances in the traditional tendency, or people pretending to have privileged communications with God. Today, toward the goal of accelerating this firearm control, we will be able to use the collapse of economic conditions of the nation-states that will bring with it a complete destabilisation of the social realm, hence an increase in violence. I have no need to remind you, nor show you, brothers, the foundations of this control of the firearms. Without it, it would become almost impossible for us to bring to their knees the populations of the targeted states. Recall with what success our predecessors have been able to control the Germany of 1930 with the new laws put into effect at that time, laws on which are actually based the current laws of the nation states regarding the same control. 25. The last steps are related to the Omega phase, which was experimented with based upon the experimentations carried out at the beginning of the 70s. They contained the implementation at the worldwide scale of the electromagnetic weapons, the climate changes bringing the destruction of the crops, the failure in these conditions of the agricultural lands, the future of population control of these states mandatorily passes through the absolute control by us of the food production at the worldwide scale, and through the takeover of the main food roadways of the planet. To do so, it is necessary to use the electromagnetic, among others, to destabilize the climates of the most productive states on the agricultural side. Regarding the poisoning of nature, it will be more accelerated as the growth of populations will push it towards without restriction. The denaturing through artificial mean of food products of everyday consumption, the poisoning of nature through an exaggerated and inconsiderate use of the lands, and the massive utilisation of chemical products in agriculture, all this, brothers, will bring about the assured ruin of the food industries of the nation states. 26. The use of electromagnetic to provoke earthquakes in the most important industrial regions of the nation states will contribute toward the acceleration of the economic collapse of the states that are the most menacing to us. So it will amplify the imperative of the implementation of our New World Order. 27. Who will be able to suspect it as us? Who will be able to suspect the means we utilised? Those that will dare stand against us by circulating information regarding the existence and the content of our conspiracy will become suspect to the eyes of the authorities of their nation and their population. Thanks to disinformation, lies, hypocrisy, and the individualism that we have created within the people of the nation states, man became an avowed enemy for man. Thus, these independent individuals, who are the most dangerous for us, will be considered by their peers as being enemies rather than liberators. The enslavement of the children, the looting of the riches of the third world, the unemployment, the propaganda towards the liberalisation of drugs, the befuddling of the youth of the nations, the respect towards individual liberties, ideology propagated within the Judeo-Christian churches and with all the nation states, the obscurantism considered as a source of pride, the inter-ethnic conflicts, and our last achievement, the budget cuts. All this allows us at last the completion of our ancestral dream, that of establishing our New World Order. End of late June 1985 document. Okay, guys, let me know what you think down below. I'll put the link in the description. And yeah, let me know what you think. And like, share, or subscribe. If you haven't already, please do. I'm trying to get to that 1,000, so I don't know why. I don't think I'll be monetized ever. But anyway, let's see if we can get there anyway and see what happens. Okay, guys, you take care. Again, let me know what you think down below. This is what we're trying to fight, okay? And because this come from the Q Research Board, look, this is what Q is about. If you love your country, that's what Q is about. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say. We can talk about it when I go live again if you like. We can talk about who that is and what it is. Okay, guys. Have a good one. Bye.